Victor Hale is standing at Martha Calloway's front gate right now. Briefcase, pressed shirt, court order in his hand. She's 71, alone, 41 years in this house. And as of noon today, none of that matters anymore. She has no lawyer, no money, no family within 300 miles. What she has is a strip of faded red fabric she tied to that fence post at dawn. Hands shaking, body running on no sleep, and the last of something she had been saving for 20 years without knowing why. She tie-dyed in the dark. She went back inside. She sat at the kitchen table and she waited. 6 hours. Nobody came, and then the highway started shaking. 50 engines, one direction, straight toward her gate. Victor Hale heard them before he saw them, turned around slowly, and the color left his face. This is that story. New here? Stay with me. 1 if you're new. 2 if you've been here before. 3 if you never miss. One question. What does a red ribbon mean to a man who learned to ride before he learned to drive? Victor Hale had a system. He had developed it over 11 years of debt collection. 11 years of walking up driveways, knocking on doors, watching people crumble. The system was simple. Arrive on time, look calm, let the paperwork do the talking. Never raise your voice, because you never needed to. The law was already on your side. All you had to do was show up and wait for the inevitable. He had never once had a reason to change it. He checked his watch. Noon exactly. The gravel crunched under his shoes as he walked toward the porch. The farmhouse looked the way it always looked, tired, sun-bleached, the kind of place that had been beautiful once and was now just holding on. A rusted weather vane on the roof. Rose bushes along the fence that someone had clearly loved once and hadn't had the heart to pull out. Sentimental, Victor thought. That was always the problem with these people. Too sentimental to make practical decisions until someone made them for them. He was almost at the porch steps when he heard it. He stopped, cocked his head. It was low at first, a vibration more than a sound, the kind that climbed up through the soles of his shoes before his ears had time to process it. He had heard traffic before, had heard trucks on highways, construction equipment, the ordinary percussion of a working rural county. This was none of those things. This was deliberate. He turned around. The highway at the end of Martha's long gravel driveway, the flat, empty stretch of road he had driven in on 20 minutes ago without passing a single vehicle, was full. Not cars, motorcycles. They came from both directions simultaneously, rolling in slow and steady from the east and the west, spreading across the road the way water spreads across a flat surface, finding every inch, leaving no gap. No sirens, no shouting, no chaos of any kind, just engines. And men, and the particular terrible patience of people who had already decided how this was going to go. Victor counted instinctively, 10, 20, 30, and then stopped counting because the number didn't matter anymore. What mattered was that they were filling the road, filling the driveway entrance, spreading along the fence line on both sides of the property in a slow, unbroken arc that had only one geometric name, a circle. He was inside it. His briefcase felt suddenly very light in his hand, very inadequate. The engines cut one by one, not all at once, but sequentially, like a sentence being spoken one word at a time. Each one that went silent made the remaining ones louder by contrast, until the last engine died, and the quiet that followed was the loudest thing Victor Hale had ever heard. 50 men. Sitting on their bikes, not moving, not speaking, just watching him. Victor's jaw tightened. He was not, he told himself this clearly, deliberately. He was not afraid. He was a legal representative of a licensed financial institution, executing a lawful court order. He had done nothing wrong. He had every right to be here. Whatever this was, whatever these people thought they were doing, they had no legal standing, and he had paperwork that said so. He straightened his cuffs, lifted his chin, and then the man at the front of the formation swung off his bike. He didn't hurry, didn't need to. He moved the way certain men move, with the absolute economy of someone who has never once in his life wasted emotion on something that wasn't necessary. Boots on gravel, vest catching the noon sun, silver at his temples, jaw set, eyes that had the particular quality of having seen a great deal and retained all of it. He walked toward Victor slowly, stopped 8 feet away, and just looked at him, not aggressive, not theatrical, just present, the way a wall is present, the way something immovable is present when you've spent your whole career believing everything has a price and everything can be moved. Ray Ironside Garrett had not planned to speak first. He had learned a long time ago that silence was the most efficient tool in any confrontation. Let the other man fill it. Let him talk himself into the corner. Silence made people reveal exactly what they were afraid of. Victor Hale lasted 14 seconds. "I don't know what this is," he said. The reasonable voice. The professional voice, smooth, measured, calibrated for courtrooms and kitchen tables and every human space in between. "But I am here on behalf of Consolidated Agricultural Finance, executing a lawful order of repossession. I have a court document." "I know what you have," Ray said. His voice was quiet. The kind of quiet that didn't need volume because it already had everything else. Victor blinked, recalibrated. "Then you know that whatever you think you're doing here has no legal." "She's been on this land for 41 years, Ray said. Not loudly, not angrily, just stated, like a fact being entered into a record. Her husband built that porch, planted those roses, paid taxes on this property for 38 of those 41 years, without missing a single payment." Victor opened his mouth. "The debt," Ray continued, "was incurred during her husband's illness. Medical bills, not negligence, not irresponsibility. A man got sick and his wife tried to keep them both alive and the numbers stopped working." He paused. "You know that. It's in your file." Something shifted behind Victor's eyes. Microscopic, gone almost before it arrived. But Ray had been watching men's faces for 30 years. "He saw it. I have a court order," Victor said. Quieter now. The first fracture in the professional calm. "You have a piece of paper," Ray said. "And I have a lawyer." He half-turned, nodded once toward a man leaning against a bike at the edge of the formation. Lean, unhurried, glasses, a manila envelope resting across his forearms like he'd been holding it all morning and had nowhere better to be. "Daniel Marsh," Ray said. 12 years practicing property and debt law in this state. He's been through your paperwork since 6 this morning." A pause. "You want to tell him what he found, or should he tell you?" Victor looked at the lawyer, at the envelope, at the circle of men that hadn't moved a single inch since they arrived. For the first time in 11 years of doing this job, he did not know what to say next. Ray took one step forward, one step only. "Here is what's going to happen," he said. "You're going to get back in your car. Daniel is going to file for a review of the repossession order based on procedural violations in the original debt restructuring agreement, which, as it turns out, contains 3 clauses that don't hold up under current state law. He let that sit for exactly 1 second. And Martha Calloway is going to stay in her home while that review is processed. Victor's jaw worked. You can't. We're not stopping you from doing your job, Ray said. We're making sure her rights get the same attention yours have been getting for the last 14 months. He held Victor's gaze. That's all this is. The silence stretched. Somewhere behind Victor, a meadowlark called once from the fence line and went quiet. He looked at Ray, at the lawyer, at the 50 men who hadn't moved, hadn't spoken, hadn't done a single thing that could be characterized as threatening, and somehow, in their absolute stillness, had managed to be the most immovable thing he had ever stood in front of. His briefcase felt very heavy now. His court order felt very thin. Victor Hale picked up his phone, made a call he didn't want to make, to a supervisor he didn't want to talk to, and said words that had never once come out of his mouth in 11 years of doing this job. We need to postpone. He walked back to his sedan without looking at anyone, got in, reversed down the driveway, and drove away. Ray watched the black sedan until it disappeared past the tree line at the end of the road. Then he let out one slow breath, turned around. Martha Calloway was standing at the screen door, both hands gripping the frame. Eyes that had been dry all morning, dry through the notice, dry through the dawn, dry through the hour of sitting at her kitchen table, waiting for something she wasn't sure would come. Not dry now. Ray walked up the porch steps, stopped in front of her. He took off his sunglasses. Mrs. Calloway, he said quietly, my name is Ray. Your husband Thomas rode with my father for 9 years. He paused. We got your signal. Martha pressed one hand to her mouth. I didn't know, she whispered. I didn't know if anyone still remembered. We remember, Ray said. He said it the way you say something that has been true for a long time and will be true for a long time after, without weight, without ceremony. Just true. Behind him, 50 men sat quietly on their bikes in the Montana noon sun and waited to be told what was needed next. To understand the ribbon, you have to understand Thomas Calloway, not the man he became at the end. Not the man in the hospital bed, with the tubes and the machines and the numbers on the monitor that kept getting worse no matter how many times the doctors adjusted them. The man he was before that. Thomas Calloway was the kind of man who fixed things. Not just tractors and fence posts and the crooked kitchen door that swung wrong for 15 years before he finally got around to it on a Tuesday afternoon in October. He fixed things the way some people breathe, automatically without being asked, because something being broken in his presence was simply not a condition he was willing to accept. He had bought this land at 31 years old with money he had saved for 9 years working harvests across 3 states. Showed up one morning with a check and a handshake and stood in the middle of an empty field for a long time before he said anything. Martha had been standing next to him. You're not saying anything, she said. I'm listening, he said. To what? To what it's going to sound like when it's done. She had married him 6 weeks later, not because she was in a hurry, because a man who could stand in an empty field and listen to what wasn't there yet was not a man you let walk away. They built the farmhouse over 2 summers. Thomas and his brother Cal and 3 men from the county who became friends in the process. The way men become friends when they're building something together and the work is real, and the days are long, and there's always coffee on. Martha planted the roses the first spring they were in. Thomas built the porch the second. By the time they were 40, they had a farm that worked, a life that held, and a particular kind of contentment that doesn't announce itself. The kind you only recognize years later, looking back, when you understand that what you had was exactly enough. They had no children. That had been a grief once. A long grief quietly carried. But somewhere in their 50s it had settled into something else. Not acceptance exactly. More like a renegotiation. The farm became what they poured themselves into. The land, the work, each other. It was enough. It was more than enough. The first sign that something was wrong came on a Wednesday morning in late November. Thomas was carrying a hay bale across the yard, something he had done 10,000 times. And he stopped, set it down, stood very still, with one hand pressed flat against his chest. Martha saw it from the kitchen window. She was outside before he had time to turn around. "It's nothing," he said. "Thomas, it's nothing, Martha. Sit down," she said. He sat down. It was not nothing. The diagnosis came 3 weeks later in a doctor's office that smelled like antiseptic and recycled air delivered by a physician who was kind enough but clearly accustomed to delivering bad news and had developed the professional distance that comes from doing it too many times. Congestive heart failure. Manageable, the doctor said, with medication, with monitoring, with regular specialist visits at the cardiac center 2 hours away in Billings. Manageable, Martha wrote down in the small notebook she had brought because she knew, she had known walking in, that she was going to need to write things down. What the doctor did not say, because it was not his job to say it, was what manageable was going to cost. The medication alone was $430 a month. The specialist visits, every 6 weeks, minimum were $350 each before insurance, and their farm insurance had a cardiac exclusion clause buried in page 47 of the policy document that their agent had never once mentioned in 12 years of renewals. Martha found it at 2 in the morning, sitting at the kitchen table with a cup of tea that had gone cold, reading every page of the policy document with the focused, terrible attention of a woman who has just understood that the rules of her life have changed and she needs to learn the new ones immediately. She did not wake Thomas. She sat with it alone until the sky started to lighten. Then she made fresh tea, got out the farm accounts, and started to work out what was possible. For 2 years, it was possible. They refinanced the eastern field, sold the second tractor. Martha took on bookkeeping work for 3 businesses in town, driving in 3 mornings a week, home by noon. Thomas kept working, lighter work, shorter hours, stubbornly, quietly, the way he did everything. They didn't talk about money, not directly. They talked around it the way you talk around a thing that is always present, but that you have collectively decided not to give the satisfaction of being named. The second winter was harder. The third winter, Thomas was in the hospital for 6 weeks. The bills from those 6 weeks arrived in a manila envelope on a Thursday morning. Martha opened it at the kitchen table. Read the total. Set the paper down carefully. Looked out the window at the frost on the rose bushes Thomas had been meaning to cover before the cold came and hadn't gotten around to. $214,000. She sat with that number for a long time. Then she picked up the phone and called the bank. Consolidated Agricultural Finance had a rural assistance program, the representative told her, for farm families facing medical hardship. Restructured debt, extended terms, manageable monthly payments. The word manageable again. She should have heard it differently the second time. She didn't. She was tired. Thomas was still in the hospital. The roses needed covering, and the east fence had a section down, and she had not slept more than 4 hours in a row in 3 months. She signed the restructuring agreement on a Tuesday. She did not read page 47. Thomas came home in the spring. He was slower, thinner. The work he could do was a fraction of what it had been. But he was home, sitting on the porch he had built with his own hands, drinking the coffee Martha brought him every morning at 7, watching the light come up over the east field the way he had watched it come up for 40 years. "I'm going to be fine," he told her one morning. She believed him. She had always believed him. He died on a Sunday in October, quietly, in his sleep, in the bed they had shared for 41 years. Martha woke at 5:30 and knew before she turned over. The particular stillness beside her was a different kind of stillness than sleep. She lay there for a long time before she moved. She covered the roses herself that afternoon. It seemed important. It seemed like the kind of thing he would have wanted done. The letters from Consolidated Agricultural Finance started arriving 6 weeks later. At first, they were polite, formal but polite, the language of institutions that want you to believe they understand your situation while making absolutely clear that your situation is not their problem. Then they became less polite. Victor Hale arrived for the first time on a Tuesday in February. Pressed shirt, briefcase. The smile of a man who had learned that smiling made people lower their guard. He explained the situation with the patient clarity of someone explaining something to a person who is not very bright. The restructuring agreement, the one Martha had signed on that tired Tuesday, had an acceleration clause, triggered by the death of the primary borrower, which meant the entire outstanding balance was now due, not the monthly payments, the balance. $178,000. Within 90 days. Martha sat across the kitchen table from Victor Hale and listened to him explain why she was going to lose her home and felt something she hadn't felt since the morning Thomas died, the specific, terrible sensation of a floor dropping away beneath you. She asked about options. He listed several that weren't options. She asked about extensions. He offered one at a rate that added $11,000 to the balance. She signed it, because 90 days with $11,000 added was still better than 90 days. She signed the second extension 4 months later, and the third. Each one cost her more than the last. Each one bought her less time. Each time, Victor Hale sat across her kitchen table with his briefcase and his pressed shirt and his patient, reasonable voice. She felt the walls of what was possible closing in by another foot. The night before his 4th visit, the visit with the final notice, the court order, the noon deadline, Martha sat at the kitchen table for a long time. She had called everyone she could think of. She had gotten out the policy documents, the restructuring agreement, the extensions. 3 years of paper that told the story of a woman trying to hold on to something that kept costing more than she had. And then she had gone to the sewing drawer, not because she had a plan. She didn't have a plan. She had run entirely out of plans. She went to the sewing drawer because at the very bottom of it, under the white thread and the button tin her mother had left her, there was a strip of red fabric. Thomas had put it there 20 years ago, maybe more. She had asked him once what it was for, and he had told her something she had half listened to and half forgotten. Something about the old ways, about the men he used to ride with in his 20s, before the farm and the life and the settling down. If you're ever truly alone and truly afraid, he had said, tie something red where the road can see it. There are still people who know what it means. She had almost thrown it away 3 times over the years. She had never been able to. She pulled it out of the drawer, held it in both hands. It was faded now, the red of something that had been waiting a long time. Soft from years of sitting folded in a dark drawer, small enough to fit in one palm. She carried it outside in the dark, tied it to the fence post by the gate with the knot Thomas had taught her. If it's worth doing, it's worth doing so it holds. Went back inside, sat down at the kitchen table, and waited for morning. Ray Garrett had not planned to ride that particular stretch of highway that morning. The original route, mapped out the night before over bad coffee and a county road atlas spread across the table at the Iron Valley Clubhouse, took them north through Clearwater Pass and down into the valley the long way. Scenic, easy miles. The kind of Saturday ride that existed for no reason other than the riding itself. It was Danny Cho who changed it. Danny was 26, the youngest full member of Iron Valley MC, and he had the navigational instincts of a man who had grown up on these roads and trusted his gut over any map ever printed. North Pass has construction, he said at 7:45 that morning, helmet under his arm, squinting at his phone. Flaggers! Could wait 20 minutes every mile. Ray looked at him. Highway 12, Danny said, same distance, no flags. Ray considered it for approximately 3 seconds. Highway 12, he said. 50 men adjusted their mental maps and didn't think about it again. That was how it worked sometimes. The difference between a thing happening and a thing not happening. A road closure, a kid with a phone, 3 seconds of consideration. The hinge points of a day are almost never visible until long after they've swung. They rolled out at 8. 50 bikes in loose formation. Not the tight parade lines of people who were performing, but the comfortable spread of men who had ridden together long enough that the formation was less a decision than a habit. Ray at the front, Phoenix on his left, Bear holding the rear. The miles came and went the way good miles do, without announcement, without effort, the road doing what roads do best when you let them. It was just past 10:30 when Ray saw it. He almost didn't. The farmhouse sat back from the highway, a 1/4 mile of gravel driveway between the gate and the building, the kind of distance that made most roadside details invisible at 60 miles an hour. A rusted weather vane, sun-bleached walls, rose bushes along a fence line. Ordinary, except. Ray's eyes moved across the gate post the way they moved across everything. Not searching. Just taking in the automatic background processing of a man who had spent 30 years paying attention to the edges of things. The ribbon was there for maybe 2 seconds in his field of vision. Small, faded, barely distinguishable from the rust on the post it was tied to. He was 50 yards past it before his brain finished the sentence his eyes had started. His hand went up, single fist, stop signal. The formation responded the way it always responded. Immediately, without question, the practiced reflex of 50 men who had learned that when Ray's fist went up, you stopped first and asked second. 50 bikes slowed, pulled to the shoulder. Engines idling, Phoenix was beside him in 10 seconds. What we got? Ray didn't answer immediately. He was already turning his bike around, slow, deliberate, rolling back along the shoulder, the way you approach something you want to look at, without disturbing. He stopped at the gate, looked at the ribbon. Phoenix pulled up beside him, looked at it too, said nothing for a moment, Then quietly, "That what I think it is?" Ray got off his bike. He walked to the fence post, crouched down, looked at the knot, tight, deliberate, the work of hands that knew what they were doing, even if they were shaking when they did it. A bowline. The sailor's knot his father had first pointed out to him on a mailbox post outside a town called Mineral Creek 22 years ago. Nobody ties a bowline on a fence post by accident. That's what his father had told him. It's the knot sailors use when the line needs to hold and there's no margin for error. When someone ties it in red on a gate where the road can see it, they're not decorating. They're holding on. And they're asking someone to hold the other end. He had seen it once before. That morning in Mineral Creek. His father had stopped the whole chapter without a word of explanation. Just got off his bike and walked to the door. He had never forgotten. He stood up, turned to face Phoenix. "It's real," he said. Phoenix looked at the farmhouse, at the driveway, at the ordinary, quiet, completely unremarkable property that suddenly had a woman in it who had run out of every other option and was waiting to find out if one last thing was going to work. "How do you want to do this?" Phoenix asked. Ray looked at his watch. 10:41. "Carefully," he said. "And fast." He pulled out his phone, called Daniel Marsh, Iron Valley's legal contact for 11 years, a property and debt lawyer who answered Ray's calls on weekends, because 3 years ago, Ray had answered his at 2 in the morning, in circumstances that neither of them talked about publicly. Daniel picked up on the second ring. "I need you working," Ray said. "Right now. Rural property, elderly widow, debt repossession order. I'll send you what I have in 10 minutes. What have you got?" "Not much yet. Name on the mailbox is Calloway. Farms on Highway 12, mile marker 44. Consolidated Agricultural Finance." A pause on the other end. "CF," Daniel said. Something in his voice changed slightly. "They've been aggressive in this county for 2 years. 3 cases I know of with procedural issues in the original restructuring agreements." Meaning? Meaning there's a chance whoever signed them signed something that doesn't fully hold up. "Give me the name. I'll pull the county records." "Calloway," Ray said. "First name unknown. I'll get more." He hung up, turned to Bear, who had materialized silently at his left shoulder the way Bear always materialized, large, unhurried, already waiting for instructions. "Go to the house," Ray said quietly. "Knock. Tell her we saw the signal. Tell her we're not leaving. Ask her name and ask her what she needs." Bear nodded once. Walked up the driveway without ceremony. Ray watched him go. Watched the screen door and the shadow behind it that had been there since they pulled over. She had been watching them the whole time, waiting to see what they would do. Bear knocked twice. Soft, unhurried knocks. The knocks of a man who was large enough to be frightening and had spent years learning to do everything gently for exactly that reason. The door opened. Ray couldn't hear the conversation from the road. Didn't need to. He could read it in the posture. Bear's head tilted slightly forward, the way it tilted when he was being careful with someone. And the woman at the door who had been holding herself so tight she looked like she might break, beginning very slowly to let something go. Bear came back down the driveway 2 minutes later. "Martha Calloway," he said. 71. Widowed 2 years ago. Medical debt from her husband's illness. Restructuring agreement with Consolidated Agricultural Finance. Collector named Victor Hale is due at noon. He paused. She tied the ribbon at dawn. She didn't think it was going to work. Something moved across Bear's face when he said that last part. Not much. Bear wasn't a man who showed things easily. But it was there, a tightening around the jaw, a quiet that was different from his usual quiet. Ray looked at his watch. 10:53, 67 minutes. Daniel, he said, already dialing. Her name is Martha Calloway. Start pulling. He looked down the highway in the direction Victor Hale would be coming from. Then he looked back at the farmhouse, at the ribbon on the post, at the woman who had tied it in the dark and waited alone for 6 hours to find out if anyone still remembered. Phoenix, he said. Yeah, get everyone off the road. I want them positioned before that sedan gets here. He paused. Nobody moves, nobody speaks, nobody does anything I haven't said to do first. We do this clean. Phoenix was already moving. 50 men began, quietly and without drama, to move into position around a farmhouse in the Montana Valley. Not aggressively, not loudly. Just there, the way a wall is there, the way something built to last is there. And at 11:57, when the black sedan came up the highway from the east and slowed at the turnoff for the gravel driveway, Victor Hale pulled in, not knowing that the last hour of his morning had already been decided by a faded red ribbon, a sailor's knot, and 50 men who had been taught by their fathers that some signals were worth stopping for. He just didn't know it yet. Victor Hale sat in his sedan at the end of Martha Calloway's driveway for 4 minutes and 30 seconds before he made the call. His supervisor picked up on the third ring. We have a situation, Victor said. He kept his voice level, professional. The voice of a man reporting a logistical complication, not the voice of a man who had just walked away from 50 motorcycles because his legs had made the decision before his brain caught up. What kind of situation? The property is, there are individuals present, on the premises and on the road, a motorcycle club, approximately 50 members. A pause. Are they obstructing? Victor looked in his rearview mirror. The bikes were still there. Along the fence line, across the driveway entrance, parked with the casual permanence of people who had nowhere else to be, and had decided this was exactly where they meant to stay. Not technically, he said. They're on the road and on the property perimeter. They haven't touched me. They haven't made explicit threats. Then execute the order. Victor's jaw tightened. There's also a lawyer, he said. On site. He's claiming procedural violations in the restructuring agreement. Another pause. Longer this time. What kind of violations? He mentioned the acceleration clause. State compliance. The silence on the other end had a different quality now. The silence of someone recalibrating. Hold the order, his supervisor said finally. Don't execute until legal reviews the file. I'll have someone call you back within the hour. The line clicked off. Victor sat with the phone in his hand. He looked at the farmhouse, at the ribbon on the post, at the bikes along the fence line. Then he called the sheriff's department. Deputy Craig Heller arrived at 12:48. He was 38 years old, 14 years on the job, and he pulled up to the property entrance and sat in his cruiser for a moment, taking it in. 50 motorcycles. Iron Valley MC patches. Men sitting, standing, talking quietly among themselves. Nobody masked, nobody doing anything that looked remotely like what the caller had described as intimidation and obstruction of a lawful court proceeding. He had a daughter, 14 years old. Her mother had passed 3 years ago, and Craig Heller had spent those 3 years learning what it meant to be the only person standing between a kid and a world that didn't particularly care. He understood, looking at that farmhouse, Something about what it meant to need people to show up. He got out of his cruiser. Ray walked over to meet him before he reached the gate. Unhurried, hands visible. "Deputy," he said. "You want to tell me what's going on here?" Hale said. "Happy to," Ray said. "We were riding Highway 12 this morning, and we saw a distress signal on the fence post. Stopped to check on the property owner. Found an elderly widow facing a debt repossession proceeding at noon." He paused. "We have a lawyer on site reviewing the legality of the order. We're on public road and on the property with the owner's explicit permission." Hale looked past him at the screen door where Martha Calloway was standing, watching. "Ma'am," he called, "are these men here with your consent?" Martha's voice came back clear across the yard. "They are," she said. "They're guests." Hale looked at Ray. "The caller is alleging intimidation, obstruction of a legal proceeding." "The caller postponed his own proceeding," Ray said. He walked away from his own court order. "That's not obstruction. That's his decision." Ray reached into his vest and produced a folded document. Held it out. "That's our legal filing. Daniel Marsh, licensed in this state for 12 years. Filed 40 minutes ago with the county court requesting a review of the repossession order based on 3 specific procedural violations in the original debt restructuring agreement." He held Hale's gaze. "We're not obstructing a legal proceeding. We're participating in one." Hale took the document. "Read it. Read it again." He had been a deputy for 14 years. He knew what a legitimate legal filing looked like. He also knew what a man trying to hide something looked like. He looked at the document in his hand. He looked at Ray. "I'm going to need to make some calls," he said. "Take your time," Ray said. "We're not going anywhere." Daniel Marsh had found the first violation at 11:14 that morning. He was sitting in his car on the highway shoulder with his laptop open, pulling everything filed under the name Calloway in the past 3 years. The restructuring agreement came up at 11:19. He read it fast, systematic, flagging as he went. Page 1, page 2, standard language. Boilerplate he had seen 100 times. Page 7 stopped him. He read it twice. Then he called Ray. "I've got something," he said. "Talk." "The acceleration clause, the one that triggered full balance repayment on Thomas Calloway's death, it's conditional. There's a carve-out for medical hardship cases where the debt was incurred during a qualifying illness." He paused. "Martha Calloway's debt qualifies. It was incurred entirely during her husband's cardiac treatment. Under state law, that carve-out should have been disclosed to her at signing. It wasn't? There's no disclosure acknowledgement in the file, which means either she waived it without being told what she was waiving, which is a violation, or it was never presented to her at all, which is a bigger violation. How big? Big enough that the acceleration clause may not be enforceable, Daniel said, which means the full repayment demand may not be legally valid, which means this entire repossession proceeding may be built on a document that doesn't hold up. Can you file? Ray asked. Already drafting, Daniel said. Give me 30 minutes. He had it filed in 22. Victor Hale received the call from his company's legal department at 1:15. The legal department representative spoke for 4 minutes. Victor listened. His expression did not change. He had trained himself over 11 years to keep his expression neutral when receiving information he did not want to receive. When the call ended, he sat for a long time looking at the ribbon on the fence post. He had done this 43 times, 43 properties. 43 families. He had sat across 43 kitchen tables and explained in reasonable, measured tones why the numbers didn't work and what was going to happen next. He had never once thought about page 7. He had never once thought about what he wasn't telling them. He started his engine, pulled onto the highway, did not look in the rear-view mirror. Deputy Hale came back through the gate at 1:23. "Order's been withdrawn," he said. Ray nodded once. "Legal filing is legitimate. County court has it. There'll be a review." Hale paused. "Company's legal team called the court directly. Apparently they've been aware of the disclosure issue for some time." Something in Ray's expression shifted, microscopic. There and gone. "Aware," he said. "That's the word they used." The two men looked at each other for a moment. Hale folded the legal document carefully, held it out. "Keep this," he said. "Mrs. Calloway is going to need it." He walked back to his cruiser, paused at the door, turned back. "For what it's worth," he said quietly, "you were right about the road. Public road, owner's consent, legitimate legal presence. Everything by the book." "We try," Ray said. Hale got in his cruiser, pulled away. Ray turned around, looked at Danny Cho, 26 years old, the kid who had suggested Highway 12 instead of the North Pass because of road construction, standing near the gate and not fully understanding yet what his small practical suggestion had set in motion this morning. Ray looked at him for a moment. Danny looked back, uncertain. "Good call on the route," Ray said. Danny didn't know what to say to that. He didn't need to. Martha Calloway made coffee the way she had made it for 41 years. Not from a machine.
From a percolator dented, reliable, older than most of the men currently sitting in her kitchen. That took 11 minutes and filled the whole house with a smell that was indistinguishable in Martha's mind from the smell of mornings when Thomas was still in them.
She had already started it before Ray knocked, before the order was withdrawn, before she knew for certain how the morning was going to end. She had made coffee for 50 men on the assumption that they were going to need it. That was Martha Calloway. Ray sat at the kitchen table, the same table where she had signed the restructuring agreement, where she had read the final notice, where she had sat alone at 2 in the morning reading a policy document and learning that the rules of her life had changed. He wrapped both hands around a mug that said Montana, Big Sky Country, in letters that were mostly worn off. Phoenix sat across from him. Bear took up most of the doorframe between the kitchen and the hallway, mug in hand, somehow managing to look comfortable in a space not designed for a man of his dimensions. Daniel Marsh sat at the end of the table with his laptop open, still working. Because the filing was done, but the work was not done, because the law moves at the speed of paperwork, and Martha Calloway's case was going to need someone paying attention to it long after this morning became a story she told people. The rest of the men stayed outside, not because they weren't welcome, because 50 people in a farmhouse kitchen is not coffee. It's a crowd. They stood along the porch, along the fence, talking quietly among themselves in the easy, undemanding register of men who have done something together and are now simply present in the aftermath of it. Martha sat down across from Ray. "You said your father rode with Thomas," she said. "My father rode with a chapter out of Billings," Ray said. "Thomas rode with them for a few years before the farm, before he settled. My father talked about him sometimes, said he was the kind of man who made everyone around him better without trying to." Martha smiled. The kind that comes from hearing something true about someone you loved, said by someone who didn't have to say it. That was Thomas, she said. He never tried at anything. He just was. She looked out the window, at the gate, at the post, at the ribbon. He put that piece of fabric in my sewing drawer 20 years ago, she said, maybe more. I almost threw it away 3 times. I don't know why I didn't. I'm not a sentimental woman generally. I don't keep things. You kept the roses, Bear said from the doorway. Quiet, offhand, the way Bear said most things. Martha looked at him. Thomas planted those, she said. I know, Bear said, but you've been tending them. Martha was quiet for a moment. Outside, through the kitchen window, the rose bushes along the fence line caught the early afternoon light, overgrown in places, a little ragged at the edges. The kind of beautiful that comes from years of care without vanity. I suppose I have, she said. Phoenix set his mug down, looked at it for a moment. He wasn't a man who offered things easily, but something in this kitchen, the smell of the coffee, the worn surface of the table, the quality of afternoon light through old windows, had unlocked something. My mother lost her house, he said, when I was 9. Bank repossession. We had a week to get out. He paused. Nobody came. The kitchen was quiet. She never fully recovered from it, he said. Not the money. The idea that there was nobody, that you could need help that much, and the answer was just silence. He looked at Martha. I'm glad you kept the ribbon, he said. Martha looked at him for a long moment. I'm glad someone taught you to stop, she said. Daniel Marsh closed his laptop at 2:15. The repossession order is suspended pending review, he said. Martha makes no payments until the court determines what she actually owes under a correctly disclosed agreement. He paused. There is a reasonable possibility the balance gets restructured significantly, potentially down to what she would have owed under the original terms without the acceleration. Martha set her coffee mug down very carefully. How much would that be? She asked. Daniel told her it was not $214,000. It was not $178,000. It was a number Martha Calloway could manage. A number that did not require selling a field or losing a farmhouse or walking away from 41 years of a life built by hand. She sat with it for a moment. Then she nodded once. The nod of a woman who has been through enough to know that good news, like bad news, needs a moment to settle before you respond to it. The law was always on your side, Daniel said. It just needed someone to point at the right page. Ray was on the porch at 3 o'clock when Martha came out. She was carrying something, a small bundle of fabric, red, new, folded, precisely the way you fold something you mean to keep. I went to town last week, she said, for groceries. I passed the fabric store. I don't know why I went in, but I bought this. She looked at the fabric in her hands. I didn't know why at the time. She walked to the gate. She untied the old ribbon, held it for a moment, the faded red, the worn fabric, the knot her husband had tied 20 years ago with hands that knew how to make things hold. She folded it carefully, put it in her pocket. Then she tied the new ribbon to the post. Same knot, the bowline, the sailor's knot that meant I'm holding on. But I need someone to hold the other end. But her hands weren't shaking this time. She pulled it firm, stepped back, looked at it. The new ribbon was brighter, more visible from the road, the kind of red that didn't ask to be noticed so much as simply was. Present, clear, unambiguous. Ray watched her from the porch. He thought about what the ribbon meant now, not a distress signal anymore. Not a last resort, a marker, a declaration. a piece of red fabric on a fence post that said, "To anyone who knew the language, and to some who didn't, someone was here, someone came, and this place is not alone." Martha came back up the porch steps. "How do I repay this?" she said. Ray had a standard answer for that question. He had heard it in various forms over 30 years. He found a different answer this time. "You already did," he said. "Thomas rode with men who looked out for each other. That doesn't stop when someone dies. It just carries forward." He paused. "You kept the roses. You kept the ribbon. You were still here to tie it this morning." He looked at her. "That's the repayment. You stayed." Martha was quiet. "There's one more thing," she said. She went inside, came back holding a photograph, black and white. Two men on motorcycles, young, squinting into the sun on a highway somewhere flat and open. One of them was Thomas, leaner, without the grey, but with the same particular set of the jaw. The other man Ray recognized after a moment. His father. "I found it last spring," Martha said, "going through Thomas's things. I didn't know who the other man was." Ray looked at it for a long time. "That's my father," he said. "Jimmy Garrett." Martha nodded slowly, as if something had just confirmed itself. "I thought it might be," she said. Something around the eyes. Ray stood on the porch of a farmhouse he had never been to before this morning and held a photograph of his father as a young man, and felt the particular disorienting sensation of time folding back on itself. His father had stopped for a dish towel on a dirt road outside Mineral Creek. He had stopped for a ribbon on Highway 12. His father had pulled a stranger out of a burning car and never mentioned it again. He had answered a signal from a widow who didn't know if anyone would come. The line between those two men in that photograph, young and squinting into the sun, not knowing yet what the years would do, was not just blood. It was something practiced, something passed down. Something that lived in the decision to stop when stopping was inconvenient, to help when helping cost something real. It lived in knowing what a red ribbon meant, and in not driving past it. The bike started at 4 o'clock. One by one, the particular sequence of 50 engines coming to life, a sound that built from the edges inward, bigger than the sum of its parts. Martha stood on her porch. The men moved past slowly. Some nodded, some raised a hand. Bear, passing last before Ray, stopped his bike and looked at her. "You've got our number," he said. "Any of us, any time." Martha nodded. Bear rode on. Ray put on his helmet, swung onto his bike, looked back at the porch Thomas had built, the roses Martha had tended, the new ribbon bright on the gate post in the afternoon light. At Martha, standing with both hands loose at her sides, not gripping the frame anymore, not braced, just standing. The way a person stands when they are in a place that belongs to them, and they know it. He raised a hand. She raised one back. He pulled onto the highway and pointed the bike east and let the miles come. Behind him, 49 bikes followed. The farmhouse shrank in his mirror. The gate post. The ribbon. A small red point against the fence line, getting smaller and smaller until the road curved and the trees came up and it was gone. But it had been there, and he had stopped. And that Ray Garrett thought, opening the throttle on a long straight stretch of Montana highway with the afternoon sun in his face and 50 brothers at his back, was the whole thing, really. That was all of it. You see the signal, you stop. You do what you can with what you have. And you trust that somewhere down the road, in a drawer, in a photograph, in a knot tied on a fence post in the dark by hands that are shaking but still steady enough to hold, the people who came before you already did the same. The engines faded down the highway. The valley went quiet. And on the gatepost of a farmhouse on Highway 12, a red ribbon caught the afternoon wind. Small, bright, completely still. Martha Calloway still lives on that farm. The legal review concluded 4 months after Daniel Marsh filed his petition. The acceleration clause was ruled unenforceable under state disclosure law. The balance was restructured to the original terms. The number Daniel had told her, the one that didn't require losing anything. She made her first payment in January. She tends the roses every spring. Victor Hale resigned from Consolidated Agricultural Finance 8 weeks after the review concluded. The company is currently facing a class action filed on behalf of 14 rural families in 3 counties, all of whom signed restructuring agreements with the same undisclosed carve-out on page 7. Daniel Marsh is lead counsel. He is not charging Martha Calloway for his time. Ray Garrett rode Highway 12 again the following spring. Early morning, just him and the road. He slowed at mile marker 44. The ribbon was there, bright, still tied. He didn't stop. He didn't need to. He just rode on, knowing it was there, knowing she was there, knowing that the language was still alive in the world and that someone was still speaking it. That was enough. Some people leave money. Some people leave names on buildings. Thomas Calloway left a piece of red fabric in a sewing drawer and a knot his wife still knew how to tie. It turned out to be everything. If this story stayed with you, if it reminded you that the people who show up quietly are the ones who matter most, that community is not a place but a practice, that some signals are worth stopping for, then you already understand what Heart Tales is about. Hit subscribe. Leave a comment. Tell us which moment hit you hardest. And if someone in your life showed up when you needed them, tell us that too. We read everyone. See you in the next story.